and welcome back. I'm Mike Quincy.
I'm Mike Monticello.
And I'm John Lincove.
So back by popular demand, or maybe not popular demand, but it doesn't really matter. We're going to do an all questions episode. We love getting your questions here at Consumer Reports Talking Cars podcast. Keep them coming. Text 30-second videos. Send them all to TalkingCars@iCloud.com. That's TalkingCars@iCloud.com. And we're going to get right into it. We have a question. First up, this is from, believe it or not, another Michael. Michael writes, I need a new car after my Subaru Outback was totaled in a crash with a deer. I'd settled on a Hyundai Tucson plug-in hybrid as a replacement. But now, with the Inflation Reduction Act, it seems I won't be getting the $7,500 tax credit, which is essential to making this vehicle affordable for me. So what midsize SUV would you recommend that is fuel efficient and would qualify for the tax credit? I considered the Ford Escape, but it's rated poorly. Help! So, fuel efficient, good test scores. Hey, they're obviously Consumer Reports fans. I'm guessing, around $40,000, something like that. But before we give the picks to Michael, John, maybe you can fill us in and fill our audience in on exactly what is the Inflation Reduction Act?
Yeah, so the Inflation Reduction Act was a big tax package, the spending bill tax package. But as part of it, there's new rules on the vehicles that can that do and will qualify, do now, will qualify in the future for the federal tax credits for alternative fuel vehicles. So it got a certain amount of money depending on the size of the battery. And once a manufacturer sold 200,000 units of any combination of the vehicles, then the credits would phase out over the next 2 quarters, and the credit would drop down by a quarter. The new Inflation Reduction Act changes that. The credits are be based on where the vehicle is manufactured, where the batteries are sourced from as well. It'll take away the 200,000 vehicle cap. However, it also takes away the credit eligibility for expensive EVs and plug-in hybrids. So the Hummer, the new GM Hummer, won't qualify. Lucid Air EVs won't qualify. Tesla Model S and X won't qualify again. At the same time, it also will offer $4,000 tax credit, a one-time tax credit for someone who buys a used EV. There's a lot going on. In short,
that was easy to follow.
Yeah, and the issues you have going on are that there's a lot of what vehicle was, if you had an order in for a vehicle prior to the act being signed, then it was okay. If you wanted to get the vehicle after the act was signed, all of a sudden that qualified vehicle went away. Like case in point with Michael's Hyundai Tucson plug-in hybrid. A couple other things to think about is that as a tax credit, this is the only way it really affects the buying price is that if you're leasing the vehicle. So you're leasing
in
a vehicle,
terms of getting the money back right then is what you're saying. It's not like they just give you $7,500 or $7,500 off the price. That is not at all how it works. And there's no guarantee, right, John, that if say you're buying it instead of leasing it, that you're going to actually see the full benefit of that $7,500. You're going to want to talk to your accountant because it's actually not only is that confusing, but of course, the whole Inflation Reduction Act itself is crazy confusing.
It totally is, and you're right. I mean, if you're leasing the vehicle and the manufacturer takes or the dealer takes the $7,500 that you would qualify for off of the sales price when they're figuring it out what you're going to pay for the leased vehicle, great. That's because the dealership and the automaker will end up getting the $7,500 credit. If you're buying it, it's not like you're getting a check. It's not like you're getting a discount. Only if you owe up to $7,500 or more on your taxes as a federal tax payment will you then get a credit that will wipe that out. So in no way are you getting cash money in your pocket, so to speak. I'll stop there. We with the lesson on the tax credits, so we can go forward.
Mike, it's almost like John knows someone that knows a lot about accounting and taxes and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, like maybe his wife, right? And
even this is baffling, I think, on her end. It's so crazy.
I was gonna say if John is slightly baffled and his wife is maybe a little bit baffled by all this tax credit stuff, I mean, how are you and I going to handle this, Quinn? So we got no shot, right? It's
so. I mean, Mike, you've heard the scenario. What advice do you have for the fellow Michaels out there?
I think that first of all, just Michael mentions that he's looking for a midsize SUV. Just to clarify, the Tucson is actually we would consider a small SUV. So that's the way Consumer Reports. So I think he can broaden his range. Don't just be focused on what would be classified as a midsize SUV. He's actually looking at a small SUV. I also want to classify in the Ford Escape. He's right that it's rated poorly, but you have to look closer at how it's rated poorly. It's rated poorly by Consumer Reports. I don't even want to know if it's rated poorly, but it's not recommended because of its below average reliability. Not well below average reliability, but below average reliability. We actually liked quite a lot about the Ford Escape Hybrid. In fact, if you look at of the 20 small SUVs that are rated above it, only 5 actually have better road test scores. And the road test scores, folks, are kind of give you an example of what the vehicle really is like to drive, what it's like to live with on a daily basis. So of those 20 small SUVs that are rated higher than it, 5 have better road test scores, and it's tied with 2 others. But let's just say you don't want that. I could really only come up with 2023 Chevrolet Bolt EUV that is within the price range, right?
It's not a plug-in hybrid; it's a pure EV. So
it's a pure
depending
EV,
on what
exactly.
his needs are for
thank
distance
thank you for clarifying that. And so honestly, if it were me, I would say because there's no guarantee, I just go with a reasonably fuel efficient small or mid-sized hybrid, which are going to get like 35, 37 miles per gallon overall. Something like, a Hyundai Tucson or which Hyundai Tucson hybrid, the non-plug-in. That's what I would probably go with.
Right. I just kind of went off the rails on this one. I think Michael should get a Ford Bronco Sport. So I thought at least I'm sort of in the ballpark. I feel like I'm back in school. I get partial credit here. Michael, check back with us. Let us know what you finally decide because I'm at the edge of my seat. Next up, let's move on here. Next up is Daniel. I recently had my 80,000 mile 2016 Mazda 6 serviced. When the shop tried to tack on a $200 transmission fluid service because the fluid was dirty, I immediately became suspicious. I've heard of these types of scams, and sure enough, transmission fluid isn't even a listed item on my car's maintenance schedule, as Mazda lists it as a lifetime fluid. However, I've seen things online that should say it's really about the lifetime of the transmission warranty and that the fluid should be changed every 50 to 60,000 miles, which is correct. Well, we're going to transition into this transmission question and throw it to Mr. Monticello. What do you got?
Hilarious, Quince. So, yeah, we could probably spend this podcast talking about the last question and this question, and then our producer, Andrew Belize, will kill us. But so the short answer, Daniel, is after talking to our CR mechanics, you did the right thing by not doing it, okay? But there are some nuances to that answer. Most new transmissions these days are filled or sealed for life, according to our mechanics, which means they're not intended to be serviced. So as long as they're not leaking any fluid, then you can go ahead and just not do it. But here's the thing. And here's why Daniel did it right. Because there are instances where, let's put it this way, there's nothing wrong with having your transmission serviced, especially if you start it early in the car's lifespan. But if your vehicle owner's manual doesn't outline a service interval for your transmission, which it appears your Mazda 6 does not, and you already have more than 50 to 60,000 miles on your car, which you do, then you're just better off at that point, honestly, just leaving it alone. This is what our mechanics say. Now, let's say you don't already have, that 80,000 miles on your car. Our guys say there's no harm in changing the transmission fluid with factory fluids if you plan to service it on a regular basis. So once you start that service interval, you want to keep that service interval going. Maybe it's 30,000 miles. And another reason to, now, again, you don't have to, but another reason why you might want to do it is, let's just say you bought a car and you find out after the fact, you maybe even knew ahead of time, but you found out after the fact that this transmission doesn't have, it's known to fail early, and that would be considered before 140,000 miles or so, okay? Then it's possible that having these transmission services done could actually prolong the lifespan of that transmission. It could help it, to not fail down the road. And so, of course, we have all that information, folks, at consumerreports.org, because we do these annual auto surveys, and that's when we find out which cars are reliable and which ones aren't. And again, Daniel, you did the right thing because you bought a 2016 Mazda 6, which it has above average reliability when it comes to what we call transmission major, transmission minor, and drive system. That's the bottom line, is that, Daniel, you did the right thing, but this is part of how they make money. And like I said, as long as, although there is this weird thing, though, if you've had it for like 80, 100,000 miles, you just want to keep it sealed at that point. And so there are these just nuances to the whole transmission servicing debate.
Well, Daniel, thanks so much for that question. I have this sinking feeling we're going to hear some more about transmissions in the next few minutes, but hang on. We got a question now from Lynn. I'm interested in buying a new EV with the best MPGe possible. I find that all the EVs on the market mention very fast acceleration, but I don't want that. Is it possible to buy an EV that gets an MPGe better than a Tesla Model 3 or a Prius plug-in hybrid in EV mode, something that would get 200 MPGe or better? I'm thinking that the numbers used to calculate MPGe are no longer accurate with the fluctuating gas and electric prices. What's the best way of thinking about this? Great question. Certainly timely, Lynn, with all the buzz going on these days about hybrids and EVs. And luckily for you, we have John Linkoff here who's going to give a good explanation to exactly what is MPGe.
Yeah, so dissertation number 2 of the episode. So MPGe, a formula that was created in the 2000s and introduced in 2010. It was actually worked on earlier, but introduced in 2010 by the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, to come up with an electric equivalent to miles per gallon equivalent. It's basically 33.7 kilowatt hours of energy equals a gallon of gas. So think of it that way. So at the basic sense, it allows a comparison of, and this is key, tank to wheel costs for vehicles. So it's not well to wheel, which you do hear about, the cost of getting getting oil out of the ground and how it affects cost. But it's just really the cost tank to wheel. And it's really key for plug-in hybrids because plug-in hybrids are rated with both their electric only time, which is when you'll see a 100-something or 60-something or 80-something MPGe rating. And then you'll see when they're driving as a hybrid, which is using the gas engine, and then you'll see it as a 35, 45 or something like that, miles per gallon. And it also allows, to rank EVs. A couple interesting things. The ratings come into play with the Department of Transportation, corporate average fuel economy. You may have heard that. That's the fleet for a corporation, and as well as the IRS collecting gas guzzler taxes, but that's only for obviously gas-using vehicles and big ones. So, anything that's really a plug-in or a hybrid is not going to fall into that realm anyway. And CAFE, the corporate average fuel economy program, doesn't use the exact same fuel economy estimates that you'll see on a window sticker. So taking all that in, the best way to see about MPGe ratings is to go to fueleconomy.gov, and they will explain not only all that stuff about the tax credits before that we talked about, but it'll also show you the vehicles ranked with MPGe, and it'll let you see hybrids, plug-in hybrids with plug-in hybrids with their electric MPGe rating as well as their MPG rating.
So, John, why does Quincy hate you? I mean, first he asked you to explain the Inflation Reduction Act and then explain what the heck MPGe is. I mean, I guess that he was like, well,
of the two of us, I guess I got to give it to John.
Exactly, Mike. He's the smartest guy here, so he has to do the heavy lifting.
But we didn't answer the question. The question is, do any have 200 MPGe? And John, correct me if I'm wrong. The answer is there's nothing even close at this point, right?
No, there's not a 200 MPGe vehicle. The top is a 142 MPGe combined. Is a Tesla Model S.
I get what Lynn is asking and what but since there aren't any that are 200 MPGe at this point, I mean, you can still be efficient with your electric vehicle. Yes. These things, you floor an EV, it's going to go like stink because they give all of their torque immediately, which a gas engine does not. But you don't have to drive it that way. Just because it can give you, max power as soon as you step hard you don't have to step hard on the throttle pedal. And you can do things like turn it to an eco mode, which typically in vehicles makes the throttle pedal a little less sensitive. So it makes it honestly feel a little heavier. So in an effort to, make you not drive so aggressively. And then, of course,
not push through.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, with an EV, and they vary here, but they all have some kind of regenerative braking system. And a lot of them have several different settings, so you can do aggressive regen braking. And, that's going to not only slow the car, but it's going to send energy back to the battery, so that you're not just wasting it. And if you set it to its most, if it's an EV that has a very aggressive regen setting, which these days we call one pedal driving, because it is, just a little bit after you let off the throttle pedal, I shouldn't say gas, throttle pedal, it starts slowing the car very abruptly almost, to the point that you can actually come to a complete stop without ever using, your regular brake pedal. You can, gain some efficiency back with your EV. So there's ways to be more efficient and to not be inefficient. Let's put it that way.
But listen, it's an interesting question. It's complicated. It's not easy. There's no easy answer between EVs, plug-in hybrids. It is a question that a lot of people are having these days, and we're going to be studying more and more as Consumer Reports continues to buy these vehicles, testing them, and reporting back to you, our loving and faithful audience. Which brings us to Joel from Long Island. I never miss an episode. Keep up the good work. Yeah, yes. There's frequent verbiage about the number of gears in an automatic transmission. I've driven everything, including 6, 8, and 10-speed transmissions, including CVTs, which I know most enthusiasts loathe. Each car has driven beautifully in its own way, but I'm not sure if I was supposed to detect any differences regarding the number of gears in each vehicle. In other words, if someone enjoys how a car drives, handles, and is happy with the gas mileage, why should they care about the number of gears? Joel, man, I am totally with you on that. Some of the thought is more is better. 6, 8, 10-speed automatic transmissions, dual clutches, CVTs, everything. And luckily, these car geeks at Consumer Reports have also driven them all. And I think Mike and John will probably agree with me. It really isn't the number of gears. It's the application. And in Absolutely. That, what that means is some cars with multi-speeds automatics perform well. Some don't. Some CVTs are pretty good and some aren't. Some dual clutch applications are pretty good. Some are totally awkward. I mean, I don't know if you guys remember the Smart Car.
It was a single clutch automated manual. So, and it was an early, that was still early times for that. And there pretty much weren't any great single clutch automated manuals, but that was like maybe the worst one.
It was probably the worst transmission I've ever driven. And just to give a quick synopsis, when you're at a stop sign in the Smart Car and you go out, you press the gas pedal, you start accelerating. When the car goes to shift, everything almost like shut down. There would be this lag, and then it would kick back in and it would keep going. And it was crazy. And what's funny is, Monty, you brought up the Mazda 6-speed automatic transmission in your earlier answer. And I checked in with super smart data guy Steve Ellick, and he's like, yeah, I mean, it's not a fancy transmission. It's a 6-speed, but it's proven to be super, super reliable. So not only should you not worry about how many gears you have, it isn't indicative on the type of transmission about how reliable it's going to be.
Well, and that's the funny thing with Mazda, because at this point you could kind of, basically, other than a couple of models that have the availability of a manual transmission, every Mazda product for sale in the US has a 6-speed automatic. Okay, no CVTs, no 7, 8, 9, 10 speeds, and yet with the CX-50 being the only exception, and that's more transmission software tuning, I think, that has some kind of abrupt shifts. For the most part, we've been really happy with the way these 6-speed automatics from Mazda shift. They're a great example that if you have a good shifting transmission, it works well. You don't need to have 8, 9, 10 speeds,
Yeah, I think Toyota kind of showed that as well with their 6-speed gearbox and their 5 and 6-speed gearboxes they ran for a while. It really was, I mean, in my opinion, it was the 80s to 90s that it made a big difference. You think of cars that ran with 4 speeds for a while and then maybe matriculate to a 5-speed. or a lot of 3-speed automatics, and then eventually they got a 5-speed and we're like, oh my gosh, they got 2 more gears. But it doesn't matter. If you like it and it drives well and it gets decent mileage and it's reliable, who cares about the size of the gearbox?
Exactly. We've had all this discussion on transmissions. No one has said save the manuals, but let's move on. Okay. Thanks for that question. Now we've got one from Susan. Conventional wisdom says to never buy a car in the first model year. Does this way of thinking still apply with all the new hybrid and electric vehicles being made? Mike Monticello, another EV question? Come on, what do you got for Susan?
Okay, so I think what Susan's implying or asking is, just naturally related to their, powertrain, especially in EV, that they're less complicated and therefore instantly more reliable. And first of all, it's not really always true. If just take the Chevrolet Bolt, for example, it's had a multitude of reliability issues over the years, because it's been being built for several years now. And that includes the powertrain. So what I think you need to do is you need to look at the automaker. And guess what? Guess what Consumer Reports does? We rate the automakers. We have brand reliability that comes out every year with our annual auto. Is that based on our annual auto surveys, John, as well? Is that?
It is. Yes, it is.
So
Professor Lincoln, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And so I think you got to look at the automaker. If it's a reliable automaker, you have a better chance there. Let's just take the Toyota Sienna, right? It was all new for 2021 and only comes as a hybrid, right? So, is it reliable? Is it not reliable? Well, it turns out it was above average or well above average in almost all categories, except for like 2 where it was, I think, above just average, because Toyota has been building hybrid powertrains for a long time. So if you go with an automaker that already is doing that, first of all, is reliable, and second, has been doing this for a while, then you can take a risk on a brand new product like the Sienna minivan in 2021, and you're probably going to be fine. So that's why, when you're talking about reliability, you're talking from brands, you're talking Lexus, Mazda, Toyota, Infiniti, brands like that. And then when you're talking about the ones that maybe you're a little on the fence, do I want to trust this all new EV or hybrid from this one? Well, then you're looking the ones that aren't so reliable. Lincoln, Tesla, Jeep, and Volkswagens those are the ones that maybe you do want to wait a year or even a bit longer when that new product comes out, just so they can work those bugs out, so to speak.
Right, but I mean, John, the question specifically is like, does this apply to new hybrid and electric vehicles made? Almost implying that it has to do with the reliability of the powertrain.
It applies to all vehicles, whether you're talking about a Honda Pilot, you're talking about a Toyota Corolla, you're talking about Toyota Corolla hybrid, you're talking about a Tesla Model 3, because the first year of any vehicle is a learning process. Yes, they've been testing it. They've been setting up the factory. They've been running pre-production capture vehicles off the line and making sure that the build process is working smoothly and that the vehicles are assembled correctly. But once it's real and the line's moving at full speed, things happen, or a part that they had from a supplier all of a sudden isn't manufactured properly, or that part was manufactured properly, but they learned that it fell apart, it degrades or something, or the bolt, whatever the problem could be, it rears its head once the line is moving at full speed and they're delivering the vehicles. So that's why we see in our data is that all first year vehicles actually take a drop compared to the previous generation's final year. The most reliable one to buy is the final model year, final version of the previous model year. So right. Like when that the car you want to buy is being redesigned, buy the current one, before it comes out, the new one comes out. So whether it's a hybrid or an EV, a new car, particularly something all this new technology, and it's a new car that's never been built before. Yeah, if you're concerned about reliability, stay away for a year. Stay away for 2 years. Look at our data. Look at the reliability survey that we have that comes out every fall, and then gets updated in the following spring. See how the vehicles are, because it does affect everyone. It affects some more than others, as Monty was talking about.
Right. And John, I love the way that you described the complexities of what goes into a mass market production vehicle. I mean, this isn't just, the Ford assembly line in the 1910s and 20s or something like that. It's really hard to build a new vehicle. And but what's interesting to me, though, is a lot of the issues that we see in Consumer Reports reliability surveys don't have as much to do with powertrains as they do with in-car electronics and things like that. So that might be the thing to worry about in a first model year car as opposed to the drivetrain. We're going to wrap up this awesome episode of Talking Cars with a question from Rochelle. I'm a huge fan of your show. I'm in need of a new car as I was recently offered a job that will require me to drive 100 miles in a day. I'm currently driving a 2005 Nissan Altima that I love for its comfort, space, and at one time, speed. I think I should go with a hybrid, but I'm unsure if the extra cost of a hybrid is really worth it. I'd really like a sedan or small SUV. Any suggestion would be greatly appreciated. So I love the questions where people want to know which model that we would buy, because quite often we're all over the place. But Mike, I'm going to start with you and ask which. Yeah, well, somebody's got to go first. What would you recommend Rochelle buys?
Okay, so I might be reading a bit into what Rochelle is saying there, but it sounds to me like Rochelle is looking for a car that excites her a little bit. And so when I think about a car that's kind of, fun to drive in sort of that, category, I would lean toward a Mazda 3. And because, for one thing, it's CR recommended. Okay, so it's a good car. It's definitely fun to drive. One of the most fun to drive compact cars. I know the Altima's a midsize, but I just find this Mazda 3 so interesting to drive, mostly related to its handling. Again, it has a 6-speed automatic. You can also get it with a 6-speed manual, but it has a 6-speed automatic that works very well. It gets 30 miles per gallon overall in our testing, which is decent. That's not hybrid levels, okay, but it's decent fuel economy. Has one of the nicer interiors you're going to find in that category of cars. And I think it's one that down the road, you're still going to find it reasonably enjoyable. And also, you can get it in a hatchback. And beauty's in the eye of the beholder. But the current Mazda 3 hatchback, I think, is just gorgeous. I mean, you can't see out of the thing. Its rear three-quarter vision is not great. And that's part of the reason why I think it's so beautiful, because it has this huge span on the sides that it's all metal instead of windows. It doesn't make it dangerous. It's just a little harder to see backing up and changing some lanes. But I think that John's like, whatever. John's like, this guy's an idiot.
Backing up, changing lanes.
Whoever does that, I go straight ahead. And
I get blind spot warning, right?
Quarter mile at a time, Mike. You live your life a quarter mile at a time.
Thanks, Vin Diesel.
Yeah.
Mike, I actually really like your pick, but I'm wondering if John, you have a car for Rochelle that she can see out of?
Yes, I do. So I would go with a Hyundai Elantra hybrid. It is 55 miles per gallon on the highway, according to our tests. So it doesn't plummet. It's a high. Some hybrids do really well in the city, and then their highway is so-so. The 48 miles per gallon overall, 40 miles per gallon in the city. So I used to drive to Consumer Reports and back 50 miles each way. Totally appreciate that highway speed. You could just cruise almost, just on electricity, depending on your speed, maybe a little slight downhill. It'll cost you about $1,005 a year. Again, depends on gas prices, but apples to apples, that's almost $500 less than you would pay if you bought a regular Hyundai Elantra. I don't have the payoff time for the difference, but I would gather probably 2 to 3 years is going to be the difference in fuel savings. It's a great vehicle. I would get that. I would get one with leather seats just for support and adjustability for that long trip.
Yeah, no, the higher trim lines of the Elantra are really nice. But considering all of her things and what she's looking at, I'm going hybrid all the way, and I'm going Toyota Prius. I know it's not exciting, but you're getting hatchback versatility. I mean, Monty, you talked about the hatchback. She mentioned it. She likes kind of, maybe she's looking at a small SUV, so it's somewhat practical. What I love about the Prius is that Consumer Reports literally has decades of stellar reliability around this car. If you're the type of car owner that wants fuel efficiency and reliability, man, it's tough to beat the Prius, and that magic number of 52 miles per gallon overall in Consumer Reports testing is really, really pretty awesome. And you guys, could say, well, it's not a really exciting car to drive. I get that. I totally get that. But it doesn't really sound to me like, she's like, my commute is through the canyons and I'm going to do all the curvy roads and all that stuff. It doesn't sound like that. But anyway,
Trust me, my Mazda 3 pick for her is going to bring the excitement back to driving for her.
It's a good pick. That's an inspired pick, in fact.
Don't patronize me, Quiz.
Well, hopefully Rochelle will tell us what it's like to drive her Hyundai Elantra.
Definitely want to know how it's going, and you can thank me for the great reliability of your Prius. Anyhow, that is going to wrap up this very exciting edition of Talking Cars, which was produced by Andrew Belize and edited by Anatoly the Great Shumsky. As always, check the show notes for more information on the vehicles and topics that we've talked about. And reminder, keep your questions coming. TalkingCars@iCloud.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week.